Hello and welcome to a new episode of Academic Chat, your series dedicated to exploring academic concepts and topics related to the programs taught at Faculty of Governance, Economics and Social Sciences. Postcolonial studies explore the effects of colonialism on cultures and societies. This field of study looks at how the history of colonization by European powers has shaped the cultural, economic and political aspects of colonized countries. It explores themes such as identity, history, power and resistance, focusing on how formerly colonized people reclaim their voice, their culture and their history. How can we define post-colonial studies? In what ways do post-colonial theories remain relevant in today's global affairs? And how do these ideas resonate specifically with the New South? We will attempt to address all these questions in today's episode with our guest speaker, Professor Najib Bounahai. But before, let's take a moment to hear from our student at UM6P Rabat on today's topic, post-colonial studies. We'll be back afterwards.
I personally believe that any discourse, whether it be academic or social, that's being taken in the Global South pertains directly to the post-colonial because, first of all, we live in a post-colonial era that follows colonialism and occupation of different parts of the Global South, but also because we're still seeing the consequences of colonialism and the impact of the colonial efforts of global powers of the West. And those impacts can be seen economically, but also socially, culturally, and psychologically, as discussed in depth by Frantz Fanon in a lot of his work, including Dark Skin, White Masks, which is one of his seminal books.
Honnêtement, je pense que les études postcoloniales sont un plus indéniable pour tout parcours académique. Elles permettent une grille d'analyse et de lecture autre que celle qui est donnée classiquement par les sciences humaines et sociales. Les études postcoloniales et toutes les studies comme les gender studies, les African American studies, etc. donnent une perspective d'un point de vue minoritaire qui est nécessaire aujourd'hui à la compréhension du monde social.
Thank you to our students for these comments that will allow us to open the discussion with our guest speaker for today's episode, Professor Najib Bounahai. Professor, it's a pleasure having you with us today.
Oh, thank you for having me, Noman. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Professor. Professor Bounahai, post-colonial studies is a field of study that has grown significantly over the past few decades, offering critical insights into the legacy of colonialism. Professor, how can we define post-colonial studies, and can you provide us with a brief overview of its significance, let's say, in the academic world?
Well, thank you once again. I think you have a couple of questions there.
Yeah.
The first one relates to definition, and the other one relates to the evolution of post-colonial studies as an area of research and study. The best way, I think, to define post-colonial studies is to look at the word post-colonial. Does it have a hyphen in between the prefix and the qualifications, pre, post, and then colonial? Or is it really free of the hyphen? Is it dehyphenated? And I think there is so much consensus in the area of post-colonial studies on handling this term as a dehyphenated kind of qualification. Because if we include the hyphen, that would really be very restrictive and even reductive in terms of historical reach. If we remove the hyphen, then of course we have to deal with post-colonial situation in what the French would call la longue durée. And I have in mind here in particular the historian, the French historian Fernand Braudel, who also looked at some phenomena in the long duration. And I think that we should really approach it that way by looking how far back we can go, in handling post-colonial situation. The second question that relates to the evolution of post-colonial studies as a field of study, I think it really gained momentum in the 80s. In the 80s, few years within the publication of Edward Said's Orientalism, and the publication of a very sort of landmark article by the Indian feminist scholar Gayatri Spivak. You know,
those are must-read articles.
Yes,
indeed.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
And can the subaltern speak? And I think that initially post-colonial studies was kind of accommodated within departments of either English or comparative literature. But then again, it elicited interest, you know, from the wider educational university ecosystem. So we had people showing interest in post-colonial studies from international relations, you know, from law, even architecture, linguistics, and all the rest of it. Mm-hmm. So yes, I would say that the discipline developed, you know, significantly since the I would say the early 80s, the 1980s. That
1980s.
Yeah.
Professor Bounahai, in your opinion, how do post-colonial theories apply to current global political and social issues? And can you provide us with some examples of their relevance today?
Well, in the common parlance of post-colonial studies, we say the post-colonial is everywhere.
That's a good one.
And it is indeed everywhere, because we look at it now in terms of contemporary global issues. I mean, we are approaching global issues such as migration, climate change, security in all its forms, whether it's border security, spiritual security, linguistic security, and all the rest of it. So a lot of people a few years ago predicted the end of post-colonial studies, and they said, is it really relevant? I think it's more relevant now than ever because the discipline itself had to adjust, you know, to the wider I would say mutations, you know, that the globe, you know, has witnessed. So I think post-colonial studies is now, you know, offering us an analysis of all the phenomena that issued from globalization. It could be, you know, offshoring, outsourcing, once again, virtual migration and all the rest. So I think that if in the 80s, people were concerned mainly about post-colonial situations. Now I think post-colonial studies is also handling issues that relate to globalization.
Yes. I got one last question for you, Professor Bounahai. How does the concept of Global South intersect with post-colonial studies, and what unique perspectives or contributions does this region bring to the field, and how does it influence the discourse on global inequalities and developments?
Well, that's a very interesting but long question. First, I have to say that I am not really in favor of the catchphrase, you know, the Global South. It's not really much to my taste. Why? Because I think that there is something quite, I would say, even inaccurate and misleading about, you know, painting the whole swath of land stretching all the way from Latin America, across the Atlantic, into Africa, and further away, all the way to the Far East, and further beyond into the Pacific. Because I believe that, you know, the term has been coined just for the sake of convenience, you know what I mean? I know where it came from. It came back, of course, from the 60s, and it really gained momentum, of course, with the Brant Line, you know what I mean? Has connections with the NAM movement, you know, what we call non-allied, of course, movement.
Yes.
But when I look at it now, I think that the Global South as a catchphrase suggests that the South has been globalized.
Globalized, yes.
You know, and when you look at countries that make up over like 130 countries make up the this kind of agglomerate, geographical agglomerate, one should look at their common differences, you know, as Mohanty would say, an Indian scholar. You know what I mean? I would say that the New South, you know, as it has been conceived even here from Morocco, and locally, from within our ecosystem, is a more appropriate kind of denomination.
Yeah.
And I really kind of heard it, you know, from the architects, you know, of the concept of the New South, from the policy center of the New South, and we here at the Faculty of Governance, Economic and Social Sciences enjoy both the physical proximity as well as the epistemological proximity. You know, we make that interplay, you know, between academia and policy making and analysis. And I like the fact that the New South has a level-headed posture, and it speaks with a sense of composure. Just one last thing about postcolonial studies,
sure.
and maybe you ask me about its accommodation within the university educational system. The class that we offer here, and we offer it, of course, on an elective basis, attracts students, you know, from different disciplines, and here at Faculty of Governance and Economics and Social Sciences, when students gather around the concept of postcolonial studies, you know, it could be othering, it could be hybridity, it could be dichotomies between the East and the West. Or, you know, or the North and the South, the global South and the global North, as the case may be, each student would actually look at the concept from their own perspective. And that makes, of course, the debate even a lot more, I would say, fruitful and instructive.
Well, thank you, Professor Bounahai, for your comments, for sharing with us your expertise on today's topic. I'm sure the audience has now a better understanding of post-colonial studies. Professor Bounahai, it was a pleasure having you with us.
Thank you for having me, Norman.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us in another episode of Academic Chat. If you want to learn more about our programs and upcoming activities, please visit our website on www.fgses.um6p.ma. We shall meet again very soon. Until then, stay connected and keep seeking knowledge.